Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and it looks like what happens in Las Vegas is gonna stay in Las Vegas, as our heroes back home still have no idea what's going on. The 5th episode has just released, and it's a weird one, isn't it? It's a weird one. Now, I'd actually been watching advanced reviews of the season to gauge people's thoughts on it, and they all said that this is where the show went completely off the rails. I kinda agree to some extent, but we're gonna be talking about it in the video. Now, if you've been enjoying the coverage so far, then I'd massively appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up button, as it helps me to help you digest what we've just watched. If you're still not subscribed to the channel, then make sure you do, as we're gonna be doing in-depth One Division breakdowns starting from tomorrow, and you definitely don't want to miss them. Anyway, episode 5 picks up with Dayna Jurgens, who successfully infiltrated Randall Flagg's operation in the City of Sin. The time jumps are pretty much missing from this entry, and instead we get quite a straightforward story which travels from place to place rather than backwards and forwards through time. Working undercover as an engineer on the Hoover Dam, Dayna picks up the attention of Julie Lowry after asking too many questions about Randall Flagg. Now, if you've read the book, then you'll know, similar to what we see in the show, in order to speak to him she has to go through his right-hand man Lloyd, who we see has been living in what he classes as heaven. Hey, looks better than most of the things I've heard from people who went on holiday to Vegas. Anyway, Lloyd states that he rides the elevator all the way to the top, which typically means that someone has access to everything, but in this episode it's literal, as we learn that Flagg lives on a penthouse floor which overlooks the city. Now, the journey that Dayna goes on in the episode differs slightly from what's laid out in the book, and she actually sleeps with Lloyd in order to reach the Devil Man. Now, though Dayna was willing to go ahead with the deed, she's saved by Julie. However, it does hint towards how dedicated she is to this mission. Had me saying, damn! I don't mean the Hoover one, eh? You having that? Now, after getting a good look over the abandoned city, we can see Tom Cullen riding in on his bike from last week. I don't know if bike is the correct term, but he's almost placed into the slave cages before being saved by one of the bouncers. We learn that a rule which Flagg has is that anyone who comes to the city voluntarily cannot be forced into this, and it also lets us subtly know that they have been capturing people and taking them there. Not everyone is lucky enough to live with the survivors, and therefore it hints towards the darker side of the city. Now, juxtaposing that more sinister side, when we see Las Vegas from Dayna's perspective, it looks like the kind of place that would get you instantly demonetized on YouTube if you showed any of it. Sounds like my kind of Monday, but it's clear that the character is definitely disgusted by it all. Elsewhere, Nadine and Harold are destroying their clothes from last week after the pair were complicit in the murder of Teddy. They make it look like he took his own life, and since no one is part of CSI Miami, they buy the story that he shot himself in the heart. Seems pretty stupid, but Larry suspects that something else is afoot, and this eventually leads him to start taking a closer look at Harold. Now, Harold himself actually hints towards a big change from the source material when he talks about showcasing some of the movies that Teddy collected. In the original work, the plan to plant the explosives was actually at a completely different location, which I don't want to spoil just in case it goes back to that. But it does seem here that he's going to be doing it at the cinema event, which is teased at in this moment. That's just a theory, and the plan could of course change, but I actually appreciate how they set up the cinema motif with Freddy, which then could of course become a place that Harold ends up attacking. Now, another diversion from the source material comes when Abigail lambasts Nick for sending out spies. In the book, she actually left before finding this out, and they did alter things quite a lot. Originally, Abigail believed that she had sinned by being proud and went into the wilderness on a journey similar to what Jesus did in the Bible. This absence made the committee decide to send in spies, but here they actually add motive to why she's so afraid. Towards the end of the entry, she's confronted by a wolf, which is of course a symbol of Randall Flagg, and then flees, showing that she may have even been scared of what's to come. Now, I'm not that religious, but if I knew for definite that God was talking to me, then I probably would have held off until he said to do anything. It's a bit weird to me that Nick was her voice and disobeyed her, but it does tie more into this general Bible aesthetic. Abigail discusses how the Israelites sent spies, which led to them being in the desert for 40 years, and this of course intersects really well with the desert city of Las Vegas. After avoiding a bit of romance with Julie and Lloyd, the latter of which I think is wearing a Michael Jackson jacket, Dayna notices Tom working as someone that clears up bodies in the gladiator pit. Julie recognizes him, which is very significant for things going ahead, and Flagg is of course looking out for the spies amongst his ranks, but I think because of his mental capabilities that he's not had his mind read. Now we can see firsthand that Flagg can levitate, and he's worshipped as a god by his followers. A creepy moment comes when he looks directly at Dayna whilst we can still hear his voice in the background, and though I would have got the hell out of there, she still continues her mission. He overlooks everything in an almost crucifixion pose, and I think the character's design in general is meant to be similar to Jesus to show us that he is indeed the Antichrist. He reaches out to Nadine, who... is she pooing in the bed? Never mind, Nadine, who's scorned by Flagg offering her to Harold, and she really goes on a journey in this episode and seems to want to free herself from his control. Now throughout the episode we learn that in order to do this, she must lose her virginity. Throughout the breakdowns we've discussed how the character promised herself to Flagg and how he has used this to manipulate her, thus she throws herself at Harold in order to escape. Harold dodges a bullet and lets one go in his pants, and like last week I bet the guy is glad he didn't get into that one. Not long after he's invited to a meal with Fran and Stu so that the former can spy on him. I was actually thinking that Fran might just be being a nice person, but it turns out she's really not. They kind of paint her out in a different light in this episode as we see how much she cares about her image and being perceived as someone that's very kind. Harold tells a story that used to float around their town when she was younger about how she gave him an ice cream once, but we discover that it never actually happened. This story has been told so many times that Fran actually believes it, and it shows Harold as being more of a victim who's been used so that she can seem good. Clearly, because of all the things he did for her on the road, he's been starting to see her as someone who isn't as angelic as he thought, and this does tie into why he might take the path he does. It definitely shows her in another way, and we see this mirrored in Nadine, who has a change of heart after meeting Mother Abigail. Unlike Flagg, she's very open, and this is shown in her piano, which she leaves the top off of so that kids can see the strings. In fiction, strings are often used as a symbol of someone puppeting other people, but the fact that Abigail has these out in the open cements that even though she is slightly controlling, she's open and honest about it. This is the complete opposite to Flagg, who traditionally appears playing card games. As we all know, when you play cards, you tend to hide your hand, so this hints to us that we don't really know what he's doing. He holds all the cards, whereas Abigail wants to work with people and show them what's going on, and it's a really subtle thing that adds a lot of subtext to the show. After telling Nadine she has a choice, Nadine goes to Larry and asks him to sleep with her. He of course can't because he has a mission, and probably because he's been reading the Daily Mail. Now this is different to the book, as in that Larry was in a relationship with Lucy Swan, who has been completely cut from the miniseries. He plays it off as being something that's better for Joe if they just stay as parental figures for him, but clearly she's bummed out and does some of the best acting that I've ever actually seen from her.
I'll be fine. Thank you very much.
Now across town, Larry breaks into Harold's home, and you might recognise the music in the background as it was actually used as a theme tune for Netflix's show Dark. Shout out to all the people who watch my breakdowns on that. I miss you guys. Now in the home he finds the Tom Cruise mirror, which it is a bit weird now I think about it. I should probably take mine down too. And also I kind of wonder why they keep doing this in the show, and I do have a theory that they actually put this photo up so that they could say Tom Cruise featured in 5 episodes or something. I also wonder if they have to use to pay his image, but we're getting off track. We are, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Now, similar to Larry snooping around, Harold places a camera in Fran and Stu's bedroom so that he can spy on them, and he makes an excuse and leaves. Larry discovers Nadine's t-shirt in his drawer, and Harold realises that someone has been going through his home after a chess piece is slightly out of place. Dayna manages to get past the bouncer in Vegas, and she meets Tom to give him a note that says run. This was actually said to her by Flagg when he stared at her, and hopefully her death, which comes next, actually spurs him on to go home. Now I might be misremembering this as I read this story a while back, but I'm sure that Dayna didn't meet with Tom, and I don't even remember her knowing who he was. I think they sent the spies in without telling them who was who so that they wouldn't compromise one another, but clearly she does know who he is. Now in the work, I think she did recognise him eventually, but I don't remember anything about a note being passed. However, let me know below. Now, the scene in which she attempts to take Flagg out differs slightly, as in that she originally took in a spring-loaded knife which Flagg turned into a banana. Maybe that was too close to that bit in Infinity War for them to do, so instead she stabs him in the neck, which doesn't actually work. Flagg tells her that he will send her home and divulges that he knows Judge Varys is on the outskirts of town, which will likely be a big scene that we see play out next time. Knowing that he will torture her until she gives up the others, she ends her own life, and in the original work, Flagg was furious about this and kicked the crap out of her body. He then ordered Lloyd to dispose of it, and he cremated the corpse, stating that he was burning trash. Cut to Fran and Stu getting it on, and though she's heavily pregnant, my man James Marsden doesn't mess about. Harold watches over this, and Stu doing the deed is pretty much the polar opposite to how he was with her. In episode 1 we learned that Harold spied on Fran through a hole in the fence, and this scene very much feels like an extension of that. Through it he learns that Larry was indeed in his home, and everything is interrupted when we learn that Mother Abigail has disappeared, which ends the episode. Now on the whole, I found this entry a bit jarring tonally, and some of the scenes in Las Vegas were just such a big shift that it felt almost neck-breaking at points. I am still interested in the series, and there's actually only 3 episodes left of the main storyline before we go into the final episode, which contains King's new ending. It's going to be interesting to see if they can fit the rest of the plot into it and pull it off successfully, but I'd of course love to hear your thoughts on the season so far, and if you're still on board or not. As a thank you for interacting with the video, you'll be entered into a prize draw where we're giving away 3 copies of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings 4K box set to our subscribers. All you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. The links to our socials are in the description, and you can also support the channel by clicking the join button, and as a thank you, you get videos like this early. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of the previous episode, which will be linked on screen right now. We go through the entire thing, so it's definitely worth watching if you need a catch up, or if you just missed it in general and want to hear more of my annoying voice. Now with that out of the way, thank you for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.